Yeah, because just so you know, like in my generation, in your younger
Mhm.
generation,
Yeah.
everything was a secret. Nobody
Mm.
taught you anything. It
Yeah.
was, they just hid their money, they just saved their money, and I do look at my parents who worked for peanuts, but were able to pay their house, their car,
Yeah.
and I mean, they were immigrants making very little money, but
Mhm.
they didn't share with us. They didn't sit down and show us how to manage the money because
Yeah.
everything was a secret. They didn't want you to know what they had and how they had it.
Mhm.
And the same thing with school. Nobody ever sat down and said, "This is what you're gonna come up against."
Mhm.
Which I think they need to reincorporate, not just talk about it, but really teach because nobody uses check anymore. But when I was growing up, none of my
Yeah.
friends knew how to write a check, balance a check,
Mhm.
the checkbooks, or reconcile it. I mean, we didn't
Mhm.
know any of that. We just knew that if we had cash, we could spend it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's how a lot of, especially when someone who is a practitioner, right? So let's use the example of a classic example of, a cook in a restaurant, right? Somebody loves cooking, then they're a chef, and then they ultimately want to be the owner of a restaurant, right? What's not realized is now you are totally shifting. You are not going to do your craft. You are going to hire some other individuals to do the craft, and you now run a business, which means you run a profit and loss statement and you manage a team, and it's a very different skill set. And I also think that understanding to empower someone to do that is not always talked about, and and it's okay to learn things the hard way sometimes, right? That's unfortunately how a
We all
lot of
got
us
to
learn,
learn things
right?
on
We
the way.
all gotta, but to the point that we can make it easier for people, and we can give them the playbook, because the, and I mean, we're talking on a podcast now. There's no shortage of access to information. Anyone can go get that type of training, but it's
Yeah.
how do they actually apply it in a way that works for the way they learn and the way they like to learn. So,
You
um,
said something interesting
mhm,
back there because I get this a lot, especially in the industry I'm in.
yeah,
Um, Everybody's goal, not everybody, but the majority of people is someday I'm going to own my own place. And it's a different game
yeah,
from working, which God bless the people who want to go to work from 9 to 5, go home and not think about it. But when you leave that realm of just doing your work to owning the business, they don't realize what really goes behind it because they just look at, I can be the owner and make some more money, but they don't realize the responsibilities that go behind that and the
right.
financial
And
responsibilities.
there's the assumption that you're going to make more money, right?
That's
Which
true.
in
Yeah.
many cases, that's not always true, and it usually takes a while until that happens, right? And I think it's like the allure of, I think it's really healthy to have this allure of being an entrepreneur and being a business owner and the pride that comes with that. And I don't think it's the right path for everyone. And I think it's okay to want to be what we call, which we're going to talk about, I know, an intrapreneur. Having a business and being empowered to build a business, but not being responsible for the entire business. I think in my 20s, I mean, I think there was a time where in my early 20s, we had a success experience, right? Nothing revolutionary, but I remember being 22 years old, being in a boardroom with a bunch of 60-year-old men doing a very large transaction. And I was like, oh my God, I'm 22 years old. Like, I honestly felt cool. And then shit hit the fan for a little bit. And I'm like,
Did they all die?
no, no, but it was, I mean, there was a lot of pressure and stress. And I think there was times where I didn't know how we were going to pay the bills,
Right.
like
Yeah.
every entrepreneur does. And I think my mental health, I was too young, and I was not equipped for that level of risk. Thank God I had a business partner, because if I didn't have, there's no way I would have had the skill set, or frankly, at that time, I don't think I would have had the resilience to be able to kind of get through some of the challenges that come through being an entrepreneur, right?
Right.
So,
Right. And
yeah,
even though you have these lessons on finance, wellness, and literacy,
mhm,
you're still going to make discoveries.
totally,
You're
totally.
still gonna, I mean, it still grows you and shapes you and makes you smarter if you allow yourself to learn from it,
Hmm.
rather
Yeah,
than just give up on it. But you said intrapreneurship.
yeah.
Am I right? Intro or intra?
Intra, like
Intra.
intra,
Okay.
intra.
So give me
Yeah.
those. three categories, and let's break them down and tell me exactly what they mean, because most people just hear one word,
Yeah,
entrepreneur. That's
totally.
it. And but
Totally.
you broke it down into three categories.
Mhm.
What are those three categories? One of them being entrepreneur.
Uh-huh. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is something, and what I'm sharing is really a framework in which to think about what it means to work in a society, right? And I would argue, there's different variations of these, but the kind of three big ones, of course, number one is an entrepreneur, which we've obviously talked about. Everybody knows what an entrepreneur is. I
Broke.
think broke and stressed all the time. It's
Because
hilarious.
we take too many chances.
Yeah,
Like that.
exactly. Exactly. An entrepreneur is a business owner that has a business with the purpose to build a team. Okay. So, this is someone who has a purpose of having employees or having team members with the essence to build something that goes beyond them and not to be the practitioner. Okay. So, perfect example is all right, let's go back to the restaurant example, right? A chef or a chef now becomes a restaurant owner. He hires a new chef, he hires a bunch of cooks, he runs the business. Okay. An entrepreneur that builds the business. Maybe he sets the menu, trains other people to do it. But ultimately, the entrepreneur will move away from ultimately doing their specific craft and training other individuals to do the craft. And the key thing with an entrepreneur is they take on all the financial risk.
Mm,
Okay. They take on all the financial risk comparative to otherpreneurs. So let's go to the next one.
that's where the
That
great comes in.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah. And
exactly.
a
One day
great
I'm going to have
somebody
it.
yeah, believe me, and I don't know, I never chose to be an entrepreneur, it just happened. Uh,
Yeah.
but, somebody gave me a great book to read once, it was E-Myth Revisited.
Oh,
And
yeah. I
which
get it.
is a great book for anybody who's starting a
Mhm.
business, and it always talked about if you're the pie maker, you don't wanna be making the pie and working
No.
for the business. The business should be working for you, so you
Mhm.
wanna train a slew of people who
Mhm.
can make the same pies as you did,
Mhm.
and that made so much sense. It's like, yeah, train people to do the job well, and that's your job as an entrepreneur, because a lot of people think an entrepreneur is the person who owns a business and is doing the work.
Yeah.
Meaning still, like especially hairdressers, right? They want to own the
Mhm.
salon, but they want to still work behind the chair, be the salon manager, be the artistic director, and that can work in a restaurant too. The chef might still want to be the maitre d', the
Yeah.
receptionist, and the cook, and
Mhm.
you can't be everywhere at once. So an entrepreneur
Mhm.
is the one who owns the business, trains people, takes the financial risk, is what you're saying.
Mhm. It's the
And I must
financial risk.
say,
That's the key element, and ultimately, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because everybody wants to have a business and wants to be able to build a business, but you have to be able to get the business producing a level where you can pay other people. And that's the hardest part, right? That's the hardest part is breaking through that
that's
that
one of the
um
biggest expenses, right? Is payroll.
biggest expenses. Exactly. So that is how we define an entrepreneur, right? And that's not our, obviously everybody knows intuitively what an entrepreneur is. Now, I think where they get really blended together, especially in the industry you and I are in, which is the professional beauty industry, which is a solopreneur. Okay. A lot of times people think being their own boss and being a solopreneur, they identify as an entrepreneur. I think that's fine. I think there's a cornerstone difference between an entrepreneur and a solopreneur, though, that's not discussed. A solopreneur is a business of one, and they're producing their craft. Okay. So that is, let's go back to the restaurant example. They are cooking for families. I don't know, right? It's just, I'm going to be a chef out of my home. I'm going to cook for families or in a salon
Or
environment.
maybe a food truck.
Or food truck, yeah, with no
Okay,
staff, right? And they're
right.
producing. So, or for a salon, the typical example is a hairdresser that says, "Okay, I was working for a salon. I'm now going to go work independently. I'm going to go rent a suite where I am now everything, right? And I can only grow my business to the extent that I can produce." And they're still actually doing a craft and getting paid for that craft. And the key cornerstone is it's a business of one.
Right, and a
Now, the next
solopreneur can only make so much money
exactly.
because
Exactly.
they're one person, so they can only do so much in a day. But should that go on my business card? I'm a solopreneur?
No, yeah, no, no. I mean,
Just
it's
so people don't get mixed up and say, "I gotta
right.
put that on my card."
No, no, and I mean, I think the issue is they
Just
consider
understanding it.
yeah, it's a framework in which you can think of things because there are certainly people that want to be a solopreneur, right? And maybe that's what brings them joy and that's their ultimate vision of success. They want to go produce when they can. They don't mind managing all the expenses, the marketing, the product, working with the accounting firm. I mean, you still have to run your own little mini business, but you're just not building a team.
Yeah,
And
and
so
there's some people who are brilliant at that because maybe they can't work with a bunch of people. Some people it
totally.
distracts them and it throws them off. All the confusion and noise around them. So it's almost like they're introverted, but
Yeah.
they're not because they're working with people, but they like to be one on one, not with a dozen.
And absolutely. And here's the thing, solopreneurs can turn into entrepreneurs. So let's
Easily.
look at my personal example. Tom, before I came in and interned with him, he started it off as a solopreneur. He didn't have money to be able to hire anybody else, and he didn't really know what he was creating. I mean, a lot of times things are created out of a need and desire. So he created Community, did that on his own, and just thought he was going to do his thing and make a great quality of life. Ultimately, then he needed help. He hired someone, not a full-time employee, a contractor. Then I came in and then it built from there. And we're still a very small company. So he ultimately could have said, okay, I want to be a business of one with Community. I just want this to be me going out and doing workshops and consulting with businesses, right? But ultimately, it transitioned and has built into, and now he's an entrepreneur, right? So that's solopreneur. Then what is the vast bulk of our economy is an intrapreneur, right? Which is someone who has a business within the structure of an existing business. Now, there's a couple
Say that
different,
again. Say that again.
yeah, a business within the structure of an existing business. So let's look at an example.
Good.
A waiter could be considered an entrepreneur, right? They are running their tables in the structure of an existing restaurant and they're compensated based on how they perform, right? They get a certain
Ah, okay.
hourly wage, but then ultimately what they produce in tips is what they produce, right?
Mhm.
But they're not funding the whole restaurant. They're not paying for the food. They're not paying payroll. They're not paying for electricity. They're not paying for inventory costs. They're not running the business. They're showing up to work. They're doing their thing. They're paid on performance, and then they go home.
So it's
Same,
up to them within that structure to
exactly.
create the finances that they're looking to create.
Yeah. And I think another example of an entrepreneur, we really, when we look at entrepreneur, there's two different ways that this is looked at. In traditional academia, entrepreneurship really refers to innovation within a larger corporate setting. That's not really how we define it. It's someone who, maybe thinks like an entrepreneur and encourages innovation within a larger company. That's not how we define it because we bring it more to the small business world, which is someone who works in an existing business that has tremendous financial upside because they are compensated or part of their compensation relies on their performance. Okay. So it could be bonuses, it could be commission, it could be tips. So, what a traditional example would be, again, a hairdresser, right? A hairdresser that is working in an existing salon, they're building their own clients that become loyal to them, but the salon environment is provided for them. They don't pay the bills, they don't purchase products, they don't manage marketing. The clients are attracted to the salon, but it's on them to deliver excellent service, retain their guests. They have the ability to upsell their guests because usually they're compensated based on a commission environment. So it's the really key element is that they have the benefits, many of the benefits without the financial risk associated, and part of their compensation is on
So
performance.
they would just walk in and they got an agreement saying if I do X amount, you give me X percentage of that, plus whatever I sell on top of that. So I'm really just using your facility. I'm not paying you. You're not paying me. I'm paid based on what I do, a percentage of what I
Well, no, usually an entrepreneur is also someone on salary, right? So,
so like
or
a
at an
waiter,
hourly
a
wage. Yeah.
waitress. Okay.
Yeah. A waitress or a hairdresser, right? They go work for an existing salon, they show up, but they have the ability to increase their compensation based on how they perform.
Okay, so they get a base salary,
Mhm.
because I'm playing totally stupid with you.
Yeah.
They get a base salary, and then, up to that base salary, in order to make more, they have to perform X, Y, and Z.
Yes, exactly. So the compensation structure could change, right? It could be a combination of a base salary, it could be an hourly wage, it could be their commission structure might differ, but the to put it very very simply, their compensation can be impacted and increase based on how they perform.
Now, there's one more category you left out of there.
What's that?
Entrepreneur.
What's that?
That's a person who speaks that they know everything but has nothing. We call them an entrepreneur.
Did you invent that term? You better trademark that.
Yeah, how many people have you met? They could tell you what to do, everything to do, and what's going to make you successful,
Yeah.
but they have nothing. So we say, "Oh, you're an entrepreneur."
I have not heard that one,
Well, you
but
can put that on your books now.
there you go. There you go.